we're definitely moving in the right direction with like looking at mobility, flexibility, longevity. We always look at athletes, but then we don't look at the guy who can barely go up a flight of stairs without being out of breath. And that's something I think a lot of us are now becoming interested. Like when I went to the physio last, like you said, I got a piece of paper that said, here's 10 moves. And it was very basic. It didn't matter what level you are, what you had done. Do you see a similarity in the wear and tear? Is it those kind of like overuse of an injury? Somebody sat with a dodgy knee for years and they eventually see somebody when it's basically fallen apart. Do we see it as a sense of pride rather than, because you said
Well,
health is essential?
yes. Well, when I think back to my training prior to my own clinical practice, right? It was always about being tough, being man, not showing weakness, right? And so, if you were injured, you didn't want to show that you were injured. And even when I think about my own time on the football field, there were times when I would hide injuries as a point of pride because I'm trying to be tougher than the next guy and show them that I'm not, I'm not weak. And uh, you know we carry that forward, but it does have an impact on our bodies. And there are so many occasions where I can think of people who, whether they're patients or people I've created content about, or even sometimes in my own with myself, that where we had something, we could have received treatment to make that thing better when it was manageable, but we did not do that out of a sense of pride or stupidity or whatever, a stubbornness, and then
Mm-hmm.
later it ends up being something that is unmanageable. I just recently did a piece of content on Ronnie Coleman, one of the greatest bodybuilders of all time. And I remember as a young teen watching Ronnie Coleman. He was competing against Dorian Yates, and it's like he would lift incredible amounts of weight. And I remember his little saying, "Lightweight," right?
Oh, yep.
He's throwing up these huge weights. But when I did this content, because now Ronnie Coleman can barely walk, and when you look at what he did and you listen, I remember there's one thing in particular that he said that struck me, and he said how he had injured his back. First, he injured it during football, and then he went to go see a chiropractor. And he, at one point, his back hurt him so badly that, and he was still playing football at that time in college, that he had to go see the chiropractor on a daily basis for several years, right?
Jeez.
And I think to myself, dude, like, you could have just gone and seen a physician, get some imaging, and then treated that problem. And that, him doing that was the precursor that caused his eventual decline over the years to this condition that he's in now. And he could have just seen somebody and potentially have stopped that whole cascade of events, right? And it's such a
Mm.
shame. And it's not to say that, I needed him to, not have a back problem so that he could continue on bodybuilding and still be competing. No, 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 that's not it. Well, all I'm saying is that he could have treated himself so that in his retirement from the sport of bodybuilding, he could walk around normally, and interact with his family and kids without having to use crutches or a walker or have had 12 operations on his back. Could have
Mm.
it could have been different.
Because I mean, I went to the Arnold's recently, the sports festival, and the number of people who were just devastated by injury, and it was almost like they continued through it because it was like a sense of pride or a competition. And you think, does it ever frustrate you when you do these videos and you see people who you knew with a bit, like, because you understand the body structure, the orthopedic side of things, that with a simple bit of work and some good focused rehab, they could be, they could have the longevity, they could have the freedom.
for sure that is frustrating. Like the I see this quite often with even some of my own patients, that people where they yeah, I'm not sure what it is, pride, or they think they know better or whatever, but they will make decisions where they are going to ignore this particular thing, this particular problem, and carry on down a particular path when and then it's like I know the outcome, right? I can see what the outcome of their approach will be. And then I think they're trying to avoid having to do this work, but I think, in the grand scheme of things, that work, although it may be an inconvenience now, is relatively minor when compared to the inconvenience that you are going to have down the road, right? Which will be so much larger, and so much more of a pain. I see that, and it does frustrate me. But I remember being very frustrated when I was creating that video about Ronnie Coleman, because I just thought, man, you did this to yourself, and there was no need.
Mm.
And sure, you can say to everybody, I'm the greatest bodybuilder that ever lived, but you can barely walk. And you've had to undergo 12 operations, and it's like, yeah, it didn't need to be that way.